Hello. No, I can't even reach the top. Hi, my name is Autumn from Autumn's Cosplay, and today I'm going to be talking about how I built my Wizzrobe costume for the C4 finals in the Netherlands. For the C4 finals in the Netherlands. I can't go back. Alright, so welcome to the Wizzrobe kind of breakdown. I built this costume originally for the C4 finals in the Netherlands for 2022. We were representing Canada as a pair, me and CNR Cosplay, and this was part of our performance. So we had to build this guy, not only ourselves, but we also had to fit it in a suitcase to take it from Canada to Europe. So there's a lot of interesting mechanics and gimmicks here to make this suitcase compressible and make sure that he is still a-okay even after the long journey. So let's kind of get into it. So to start off, I'm going to talk about the fabric layers, and then we're going to go down to the skeleton, and then we're going to go down into the main structure in here. Kind of break down into those steps. So to start off, the fabric. All of the EVA foam pieces are covered in a knit 4-way stretch fabric to give a kind of a matte, smooth finish. Next up, the dark blue here is made out of a really sheer kind of chiffon fabric. This way I can actually see through his mouth to know where I was going. And the rest of the robes are made out of a white matte satin. I really wanted that satin look, but normal satin doesn't really do well on stage, I find. The stage lights make it look kind of cheap, so the matte satin kind of gives me the best of both. So when looking here, the chiffon here is a rolled hem. Easy just to kind of go around. It is in a off-centered triangle shape. It's to kind of give it the availability to go over the shoulders, have that broad coverage while still being able to be wrapped around. So this is actually just pinned into place. Since this is an EVA foam base, I could just pin things in and they stay. So no need for Velcro or glue, just some sewing pins. And you'll see here that this is actually just wrapped and pinned into place. So this is actually where I could see. I saw out of his mouth. This is the final piece that gets added on to cover up the rest of the costume and to cover up the, we'll say, the holes of the white satin. So getting to the white satin, this is about 3 meters of fabric that is pleated all the way around the base and give it so there's so much fabric at the bottom. With the Wizzrobe, every time he moves, he kind of has all this fabric that kind of swish in different ways. So pleating the top kind of had that ruffled effect. The other thing it does is that I was wearing a costume underneath of this, and this actually had a big skirt that was holding up the rest of my costume inside, so I could hide underneath this. Kind of disguised the hidden costume underneath. So this is pinned on both sides here and about 3 points in the back, just into the foam head. And when you pin it, I pin it on an angle down, so it actually gets stuck in the foam and it doesn't hurt the wearer underneath. The next part with these robes is that the side seam here actually has an opening right here. And this is to get the sticks for the hands, to puppet the hands. It goes through this little hole here, so I can puppet everything from the inside from in the main column of the robes. Next up is the sleeves. So when designing the robes, one of the biggest problems I had was figuring out how to make an actual robe in this weird shape. What I'm talking about is typically in a garment we have our top and then the sleeves come off the side. But for him, it would be a very awkward shape to kind of move around. I also didn't want it to limit my range of motion with the articulation in the arms. So what I ended up doing was just making the sleeve a whole separate piece. And it worked out great. And it's actually just pinned to the top shoulder. And slide it off of his arm, and that's it. So this is the basic shape of the sleeve. This took a little bit of testing just to kind of get the right drape. And there's such a wide gap in here just to give the illusion that this is attached to this robe when it's really not. And that's what I'm saying with the blue here. This blue, as it comes over, hides the actual attachment method. Woo, sorry bud. And gives the illusion that it's all put together. So then, if we take a look at this, you can see this is just a really fancy tube, basically, for the main body, 2 sleeves, and then the rest is the skeleton. All right, so this is the understructure of the Wizzrobe with all of the fabric that's taken off. As you can see, the skeleton is a lot smaller than what the Wizzrobe really presents to be. And that's because how the fabric is draped really gives a bigger presence to the Wizzrobe than what he actually has. This might help explain a little bit on how this actually fits into a suitcase to go across the world. So on this here, there are 4 main pieces. There is each shoulder piece, the cone, and the head. And all of these come apart with one infrastructure piece, and I'll show you. Here, everything is balanced on a steel flat. So this actually goes through this arm, through the cone, through the head, outside the cone, into the other arm. So there's no glue, no Velcro, anything needed. It's all friction fit. All of the pieces here are made out of EVA foam, which is then wrapped in quilt batting and then covered with fabric. This was used for a couple of different purposes. One, the EVA foam is lightweight, bendable, and easy to compress to pack. This folds down about twice, folds this way and then folds again this way, so then it can fit in the suitcase, and then I just take a heat gun and it helps blow the shape back up to normal. Number 2 is the moldability of these pieces. EVA foam is really easy to use, and I can build a lot of complex shapes and curves with EVA foam. Everything is covered in quilt batting, and the reason is it hides all of my ugly seams that the foam created. A lot of times with foam, we're used to sanding things down and then priming it. With the quilt batting, that's not actually fully necessary. There is some sanding down, but a lot of these pieces do have little bumps and curves, and the fabric would show that really, really easily. So the quilt batting kind of gives that smoother texture on top and lays it up flat. Now, the reason why it's covered in fabric and not paint is, again, for the travel necessity. If this was covered in a spray paint or acrylic or even plaid effects, when it gets folded down into a suitcase, there is such a high risk of the wrinkling of the paint, and I can't guarantee that I'm going to get that out. With fabric though, is it all just stretches and goes back to place. There's no wrinkles. It's just going to present itself the way it is. So the fabrics used is a 4-way stretch, like knit fabric. That way I get the matte effect of it. There's no really shiny pieces. It's really soft to the touch. And then I can get over complex curves and shapes, like in the Wizzrobe face and this cotton. All right, so attached to the main structure here, especially on these shoulder pieces, is we have the super dangly, creepy arms. I love these. I love how they turned out. They're super gross and really creepy, which I think really fits the Wizzrobe vibe that it has in the game. So this piece here has 3 main components. There is the top shoulder, there is the lanky arm, and then there's the hand that's attached with it. So the top here is basically just 2 foam pieces that create this convex surface, and a piece of EVA foam that runs down the middle channel. That's because of the weight of the arm. We really wanted to make sure that that seam doesn't undo itself and has that full structural integrity to it. With that, the foam block that the steel flat friction fits to, and then we have the attachment of the arm to the shoulder. Here's one of the greatest benefits about not using paint and using fabric instead. So what I did is I used a leather strap to create an articulated joint in the shoulder. This way I wasn't restricted at all on how to move the Wizzrobe arms. This leather strap is not just attached here, but it's cut through the top and laid out flat here. That way there was more surface area to glue down to ensure that it did not break. Again, with the fabric being covered on top with the quilt batting, you can't see those lines because the quilt batting hides the difference in height and texture, and then the fabric over top gives it a nice finish. Moving down now, the leather strap is just drilled through the PVC pipe and threaded through to attach to the top. Now the PVC pipe is what makes up the arm. The arm is made up of 2 PVC pipes. The joint in the middle here, again, is 2 leather straps that give me full range of articulation. Then we have rolled quilt batting and a fabric tube. That's what makes the entire arm fully movable to our quilt. Next up is the hand. The hand is made up of a couple different components. So we're gonna do the understructure and then the glove on top. The understructure here is actually 3 pieces of EVA foam that have little cuts and ridges in it to attach the fingers to it. It's just roughly cut out into the shape of the hand that was needed, and carved out in the middle was the spot for the PVC pipe to go into the EVA foam. Each of these fingers is made out of a smaller PVC pipe, and each finger has the correct number of knuckles and joints in a regular hand. So all of these, except for the thumb, have 3 small pieces of PVC pipe in it, all wrapped not in quilt batting, but a really dense interfacing, just because it's so small that the quilt batting would get really messy. So we used a dense, thick interfacing that just got wrapped around and glued. And then an elastic actually goes from the top all the way through and glued into the hand. And on top is actually a bolt. It's a really heavy bolt. And the reason why there's the bolt, the elastic, and the separate joints is I wanted the fingers to be able to move a little bit more organically than just straight sticks. And if there was no elastic inside here, there wouldn't be like a resting point. So the finger here naturally wants to rest like this, but then when he's starting to move, there is that extra tension out this way that goes back. And the bolt at the top gives the extra weight to the bottom of the finger, so it really does the jellyfish hand thing. The glove itself is just sewn like a normal glove, except it's got square fingertips just to compensate for the amount of material inside of this. And then the glove is actually, this part here is EVA foam. It's just like 3mm craft foam to create the rest of the glove, and the fabric is just serged and glued in onto the inside. So overall, this creates the entire arm. So you might be wondering how this is actually puppeted. And basically, my head goes inside here, and it just kind of sits on top of my head a little bit. And there were black wooden dowels that went into the glove and just secured onto the PVC pipe of the arm. There's little holes on the fabric bit that allow the dowels to come into the fabric so I can puppet it from inside of the robe, but that is the overall puppeting scheme. It's not very complex, pretty simple, but sometimes simple is always the best. All right, now that the shoulders are taken off, now we're going down even further to the core of this costume. As you can see here, this is the steel flat. I used steel instead of aluminum because I really wanted to make sure it could hold the weight of the arms. The arms are, Connor, how much would you say each arm weighs? So each arm is approximately 3 or 4 pounds. So I needed to make sure that with, let's go 7 to 10 pounds, including this, of weight, that this wasn't gonna bend over time. And aluminum is just a little bit too soft. So the steel bar really, really holds up the weight, and it kind of gives that bounciness that you saw at the very beginning. So it ended up working out, but as he walks, he has this kind of walk like this, and it's very cool, very creepy. So let's talk about the cone. The cone here was such a pain to do. It kind of narrows up at the top, and it's got this really full back that carves back in. It's got this wide open mouth that kind of narrows in. And the worst part of all, this took me so long to figure out, hollowed out look for the inside of the cone. Because if you look at the art, you see this round head, but then it hollows back here. And I'm like, how does that even happen? We got it though. So what we did is we built the original cone out of EVA foam, and it was patterned using 2mm EVA foam, kind of adjusted the shape here and there, got it to where we wanted it. Then we built it out of about 4 to 5mm EVA foam to get the basic shape. Next, what happened is I added another strip of the 5mm EVA foam, or maybe 10, let's say 10mm EVA foam, into here to create a ridge. So you'll see here, I can tuck my hand behind here. This ridge was key to hiding all of the unpleasantries of building this. After that, what we did is we added in this black fabric. And I knew that the head was gonna come in here. So the black fabric got glued on the inside of the ridge all the way around. And then the head, when it pushed back in, was able to create the depth that the black fabric needed to do. Next was adding all of the quilt batting to the outside, and then adding this teal fabric all around the edge. The top here needed to be sewn just because this would have created a lot of bunching. So this part was sewn, and the seam down the back was sewn, but everything else was just stretched over and glued. And everything was done inside this crevice here. So it kind of hid everything to the public eye. When you come in here and you kind of look in behind here, yes, you can see some things, and I could have used, say, like a black bias tape or a piping to go back in and finish all of it, but it hid everything quite well, so I was quite pleased with it. Now, the head. So the head, I was very fortunate, and I got to use a mascot pattern from Mascots Canada to build the basic pattern, or the basic head for him. So it's basically 6 pieces that are carved out all the same way and makes this dome circle. Then I drew out where I wanted the eyes and the mouth, and took my marker, drew it out, carved it out with a knife, and got this. These 3-dimensional pieces on the face, so these eyebrows, the nose, little nostril pieces, and this ridge of the lip, were all created using foam dowels. Not the EVA foam dowels, but the kind of the stuff that you see like pipes being insulated with, that kind of stuff. It's super lightweight and it's really easy to form around. So these were all glued into here. And then the fabric was placed on top, glued into the crevices, and kind of created this shape. A couple of the pieces, like the nostrils, were really hard to get the indent to stay. So I just used a pin, like a little itty bitty pin, and pinned it up into the nostrils to really get that concave look for the nose. The eyes here, they actually do light up. I'll add some footage of them lighting up. But these are made through like a poor man's like vacuum seal kind of thing. So these are plastic that's heated up and formed over a ceramic puck. And then on the inside, we did a lot of rough sanding to get the acrylic plastic to have this cloudy look, to diffuse the LEDs. The diffusion wasn't perfect, so there's actually that really dense, thick interfacing we use for the fingers is also in the eye here. And this is entirely backed with another piece of EVA foam to make sure that light didn't bleed out through the mouth or other parts of the costume. So the animating for the eyes was done through Baconics, and the actual lights in here is by Nliten. So there's actually no soldering done in this costume, which is super awesome because then again, when this goes on the plane, it can be tossed and turned around and kicked and whatever, and I don't have to worry about the solder joints coming apart. Nliten is actually all plug and play for electronics, so it makes it really, really convenient for costumes that are traveling across the world. And Baconics is a software program that lets you animate LEDs by drawing and using a timeline instead of using letters and numbers for code. Super cool. I'll add that in there. Thank you so much for watching this video. I had so much fun building this costume with Connor and Cosplay Skilltree. I love building monsters and big props and things like that. So being able to build a Wizzrobe was definitely a challenge. It wasn't what we expected to build, but I'm really happy with how he turned out at the end of the day. I'm hoping that he'll be able to make a con appearance soon. I think it'd be a lot of fun. But if you have any other questions on anything in this build video, you can leave it down below. I'm happy to answer comments and questions about this. If you want to build your own, you can check out patterns at Cosplay Skilltree or at my Etsy, Autumn's Cosplay Shop. And stay tuned for the next one. Bye!